This recording deals with the industrial growth of the United States from about 1870 to about 1900, and it covers part of period 6. We were discussing in our last videos about westward expansion, so we're going to focus a little bit more on the east part of the United States and how this develops. One of the major developments as part of this period is invention. And Thomas Edison will be, from Menlo Park, New Jersey, will be, known for the telegraph and things like the light bulb, in addition to other inventions that will kind of push the industrial age in the United States as we kind of enter the Industrial Revolution significantly in the United States at this point in history. So as you can see, we're starting to get to modern America. He will have more than 1,000 inventions patented in his lifetime. He will create the phonograph, which was able to play basically like a record player, the incandescent light bulb, batteries. He will have New York City be the first city to be powered by electricity. He will help create the motion picture camera and projector, and he helps Alexander Graham Bell create the telephone, and he is one of the people who says hello as the first telephone greeting happens. So you can see in 1890 there's very few people who are connected, and it's mostly in the Northeast, so there's a lot of disconnection going on in the United States at this point. By 1898, you can see the significant increase here, and it'll do nothing but continue to increase throughout American history. We will have other famous inventions like the airplane, where the Wright brothers fly it for the first time on the Outer Banks of North Carolina. So you're starting to see technology really quickly increase in the 1890s as America gets to the 19th century, or the 20th century. Henry Ford will get into his Model T production. This won't really pick up until the 1920s, but you can see he's starting this, and the Ford Motor Company will become quite significant in the United States at the turn of the 20th century. So we get to see new stores as well. From 1860 to 1900, we start to see specialty stores where they only sold a single line of goods. We start to see department stores like Macy's, Sears and Roebuck, etc. Chain stores where they start to see branches, mail catalog stores, and also new ways to advertise. So you can see here there are massive changes in daily life between the 1860s and the 1900s. So you'll start to see, huge new amounts of patents with electricity, where in the 1860s there were no electric light bulbs. We've refrigerated rail cars so we can move meat and things that needed to be kept cold in order to stay edible. We have New York to San Francisco. It took 10 days using the railroad, where it took mail 10 days to reach the Midwest and 3 weeks to get to the West Coast in 1860. So you can see we're getting to more modern American life. And one of the major reasons that we start to see these great industrial growth periods here in the late 19th century is we have abundant natural resources, which we've always had, but now we have the ability to get them and to manufacture them into something that we can get. So we have a massive amount of capital, a massive amount of money in the United States that can be used literally in gold and silver to help finance these new factories. The U.S. government will support the finance of these new factories so that they have the ability to, either through tax cuts or through other things, they would have the ability to spend this money on improving them. We have the desire. We have creative inventors and industrialists, and it kind of became part of the American dream to invent the next thing or own your own business. We have a very massively improved transportation system. And we have a very large labor force because we have a new wave of immigrants in about the 1890s starting to come into the United States onto the East Coast that are going to significantly enhance our ability to actually get these things produced in these factories because we have cheap labor coming in from Europe. One of the major things that happens is in 1856, Henry Bessemer creates a way to turn iron into steel, which is a significantly stronger version of iron. And he creates incredible heat and turning it into molten iron, and then eventually gets rid of the excess carbon, which makes it stronger. And it revolutionizes the industrial age. It's kind of a steel age. So steel is used in railroads, barbed wire, farm machines. We will start to see the Brooklyn Bridge created, skyscrapers. We can build buildings taller in New York City or other cities, which we couldn't do before because the materials weren't strong enough. Now they're strong enough so we can build up rather than out, as these cities are getting far more populated through immigrant labor. And again, you can see this expansion of railroads. We only had 30,000 miles of track in 1869. In the next 31 years, we will quadruple that, more than that. We will make so many more miles of track so that people can expand their system of transportation through the marketplace of their goods. And it is also a massive symbol of growth that the railroad is kind of what built the modern United States. And these new technologies help the railroad business grow. Like we discussed, the Bessemer process making these cars and rails out of steel. We start to get air brakes, which makes it far more effective in stopping, steel rails, and then also a standard gauge of rail so that every wheel was the same size and every rail was the same size. So it was very easy to transfer one car from one rail to another. And you can see just some of the patents that the U.S. government issues between 1860 and 1900. It's a massive amount of what we think today of simple things, but it creates, it kind of influences this American society of expansion and creation. And you can see in the 1790s, there are a total of 276 patents issued, whereas in the 1900s we issue over 1 million. And it gave them the right to make and sell an invention, and also gives them some sort of intellectual property that the government is supposed to protect. And this is part of the way that the government influenced the idea of invention, that we could not only invent these things, but actually keep them for ourselves or sell them or do whatever we wanted to them because we had created them, giving us ownership of this. And we will start to see steel magnates like Andrew Carnegie and his steel company will create skyscrapers, and we start to see these buildings majorly in the 1900s. In terms of the economic belief in the United States, we really practice this laissez-faire policy, which individuals should compete freely in the marketplace, that the government should not set any prices or intervene as little as possible in business, and that someone could own their own business and make their skills to better our culture and make a profit for themselves and improve their lives. So if you had skills, whether they be education or skills with your hands, you could make yourself better. And the government should allow for natural competition for the betterment of society, that this was something that was natural and the government didn't need to intervene. This is a policy we're going to follow until about 1929 when we get into the Great Depression. And this is the policy of capitalism. This is our economic system that was all about ownership, that you could have private property, whether that be an idea like the patent office protected or literal your own property, your own building, etc. That the individuals and companies were competing, and this competition made them make better products and cheaper products, which helped the consumer. And capitalists could determine the price of goods and services, and it was all about supply and demand. They could be privately or corporately owned, these businesses, and reinvestment of profits was all about taking the money that you make, putting it back into your business through hiring employees, through expanding your business, through research and development, and this all supports the laissez-faire and free enterprise system that the government should not be involved in this. And we start to see a new form of business organization called a corporation, which was a group of people who were authorized by law to act as a single person with the ability to sell shares of stock to raise capital. So the corporations would be sold on stock exchanges, or shares of their business would be sold on stock exchanges to raise capital, to hire more employees, do research, or whatever they needed to do with this money. So with this lack of government involvement, we start to see the growth of monopolies. There were two different types of monopolies, or two different ways that companies became monopolies. One was called vertical integration, which is where you control all phases of production from the raw material to the finished product. So Carnegie would buy things like the fields where the coke fields where you got iron ore and the iron ore deposits. He'd own the steel mills where you turned iron ore into steel. He would own the ships and the railroads that moved these things to wherever they were going to market, and then he would own the buildings as well, creating a monopoly. And this is obviously going to be an issue up until the Progressive Era, when these monopolies are broken up. The other mode of creating a monopoly was horizontal integration, which Rockefeller uses with his Standard Oil Company. And you buy out all your competition of a single area or industry. So the monopoly, the point was you could set your own prices, and Rockefeller had so much money that he would just drop his prices of oil so people would go to him until other independent oil refiners would go out of business. He'd offer them more money than anyone else would to buy their business, and eventually he would own, something like 90% of the U.S. oil supply came from this Standard Oil Company, until it was eventually broken up because this lack of competition was kind of anti-capitalistic, and we needed to get rid of this. And Teddy Roosevelt will help us do that in the Progressive Era.